All right. Hey, everyone. It's great to be back together again. We had a little bit of a hiatus there for a week, but it's nice to be back together. And what I'd love to know is, what is your networking win in the last 2 weeks since we last saw each other? So I don't know who should start.
Yeah. Well, I think it's my job now. I can kick it off, and then I'll just start passing the talking wand around to everyone. But hi, everyone. Welcome to Wicked Connected. My networking win of last week was I scheduled my first meeting out of a networking event for my new job. So I'm excited about that. We're meeting tomorrow or Wednesday. Sorry. It's halfway through Monday and I don't know what day it is already. But I'm excited. I have quite a few networking events to go to this week, and I've already started to pack my calendar up to get out there and start introducing myself as a new member of Supporting Strategies and kind of get going. But I can pass it over to Stephen.
Sure. Yeah, I think I briefly mentioned in the past, but one of them was actually a connection that I met through networking. And I am getting closer to the fractional CFO role at that company. So kind of interesting how the dots kind of connected there. But then even more so, some of the events that I went to were held by Markham on the construction side, which are fairly closely related to the industry that I'm going into. And so there's even some other interesting connects coming out of those as far as kind of pulling all the threads together type of thing. So more to come as it evolves, but I think there's going to be a couple of interesting wins that come from that. And I guess I'll hand it over to Taylor.
Thank you very much. Also, Amelia, the transition of a new job and getting that first networking meeting on, there's no better feeling, especially if you've been tenured in doing this, but turning that new page, it's like a breath of fresh air. So last week I actually had two I want to talk about. One is that I love, and that's good old LinkedIn. Jeff, I know you mentioned a couple of times reaching out to people on LinkedIn is something that you tell yourself to do monthly. And I had coffee last Monday with someone that I saw a lot of similarities with what they were posting and similar networks. So reached out, connected over coffee. I love meeting someone for the first time in person. And so it was really nice. And we had a ton of synergies. So that was great. And then part of a organization that I'm a part of, I've been having a working relationship with this woman for months and months. And we actually scheduled some time to go on site at her company with my team and do more of a educational seminar, which it's so nice, especially when one contact, maybe a couple contacts, being able to go on site, really, be in the area where they work every day, meet the team further. It was really nice full circle professionally. So that was definitely a big one.
Awesome. And I guess I'll sort of take up the baton here and say, so many things last week. I mean, bunch of great sort of dinners networking dinners with companies that my brother and I have been in contact with, and literally, Taylor, to the point about the LinkedIn thing, literally just had a call with a guy. So he sent me, I don't know if it was him or his bot or whatever, but I got one of those long things that look like a form, email or a LinkedIn contact. And he sent it to me and I wrote back, hey, it was just hey, you might be interested in these articles in this episode of my podcast. And I'm like, all right, that's great. Thank you. Would you be interested in a copy of my book? And so I sent him a copy of my book. And so we just had a call. And I think I'm going to be on his podcast now. So that was, kind of a cool thing. But I have to say my favorite networking thing that happened last week was when I was writing my book, I reached out to all these HR leaders, and this one woman who I worked with many, many years ago at the Hershey Company, she got me invited. They were doing a learning at work week at her company. And I was one of the featured speakers because I had reached out to her and so forth. And I got to give a presentation about, middle management stuff, which is my focus these days. And I got to talk to them for about an hour, and I think I had 29 people. As there were people from the UK. I think there might have been some people in Asia. I don't know. It was people all over the world. So very cool. So that was kind of cool, and it was all because I just randomly reached out to this person I hadn't talked to in 10 years. So
that's awesome.
Always works. So
LinkedIn is so fun like that, where you can connect with people and then reconnect with people. I think in a professional setting, I think Facebook kind of does that for some generations as well. I remember when we got my grandma set up with Facebook, and she was like, I just talking to my high school friend that I haven't seen in 30 years because she added me on Facebook. And I feel like LinkedIn has a lot of those same possibilities, which always gets exciting.
Well, it's funny though, because I talk about LinkedIn. I was talking about social media with my UMass Boston marketing students, and they were like, LinkedIn was, we were I don't know if you all know the BCG matrix. Stephen probably knows it, whatever. But it's basically like a company can be a star or a question mark or a cash cow or a dog. And I was like, what's an example of a dog in the social media market? And they're all like LinkedIn, and I'm like, yeah, that's not. I don't think so. I think that's just because you all aren't in the right stage of your career yet.
But they'll need it. That's the thing is, I talk to people all the time who are, still in school or maybe graduating high school, going into college, like as, mentorship wise, use LinkedIn, use it as soon as you possibly can, use it to get internships or just start learning about companies and people and roles. Like, hopefully you're going to figure out what you might be interested in or not, whether you have an idea or you don't. But LinkedIn is everyone should be on it, no matter what you do.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I can't believe they said that. When I was a BDR manager, we'd hire kids right out of college. And that was the first thing I would always do is, do you have a LinkedIn? If not, I would sit down with them and help them set their first LinkedIn up.
Yeah.
I guess first they're only LinkedIn. I don't think we have.
And nothing says like somebody's trying to, fake person going to sell you then somebody has like fewer than like 20 contacts and they've only had an account for like 2 weeks,
Yeah. That was something we really emphasized, get to 500 connections, because if you, and I know that seems so silly, but it really is. Like, if you don't have 500 connections on LinkedIn, people kind of scratch their head. I think it depends on your stage of your career and kind of your role, actually, to be like in my role. People won't talk to me if I don't have more than 500 connections.
But I think it all boils down. I mean, I think you as sales professionals, I hope you agree with this. I think it all boils down to what you're trying to do is create trust.
Yes.
And in the end of the day, if you only have like 2 connections, I immediately don't trust you. Sorry.
Like, what AI bot is this? What are you trying to get?
It puts a face to the name. Like, you can see a photo, you can see, oh, we went to the same college, or they're in the same area as me, or maybe there's similarities, maybe there's not. But I know for me, like when someone requests to follow me or connect with me, I'll look on their page just out of curiosity. And I can tell a lot from what a person's doing, and whether it's a professional alignment, maybe they're trying to learn more about what I do. It's really helpful. But, for the case that is non-sales related, one of my good friends went to school for videography, and they had a hard time finding gigs. It's like, do you have a LinkedIn? And I saw his LinkedIn, and it was, as you can imagine, being very underutilized. We upped that. And now the connections, he's getting jobs that he didn't even think that, he'd be able to get, or just get connected to people. So it's really helpful. But I think we can turn this back to Jeff, because
I was trying to stall, but
I know.
Yes,
I'm keeping an eye on the time this time around.
Yeah.
We always go over the time, but we are keeping an eye on it this time.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah.
Although Taylor, I will say it's probably sad that Jeff and I both didn't mention that we had our dinner together.
That's right.
That should have been the highlight, obviously.
It's all about me. It's all about me.
But I think we are going to do, Amelia, please kick it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So people have been tuning in. We've had 2 episodes so far, but we wanted to do a couple episodes where we were letting our listeners get to know us a little bit. So we're going to do a quick little interview. We're going to start with Jeff this week. And then as we move forward, we'll kind of pick people. I can volunteer someone next week in our group chat, and then we'll figure it out. But to kick it off, Jeff, tell us your story. What's your elevator speech?
Sure. My elevator speech, I guess, is, well, actually, I'm going to go a little bit longer than elevator speech.
I don't know. Yeah.
My pitch, whatever it is. Well, I would say born in Newton. My parents still live in the house where my dad grew up. So definitely from, this area.
Wholesome.
went through, public school, Newton South High School, and ended up studying in college chemistry and physics. That was my major. Totally random, whatever. Don't do anything with that. But my first job after college was I was a math and physics teacher at a school out in Western Massachusetts. And that wasn't necessarily like my cup of tea. And so I ended up getting a degree in marketing. And I could tell lots of stories about my career, but I will just say I started out my first real corporate job. I was an associate brand manager on the Ritz cracker brand at Nabisco, and then went on to work on the Oreo brand. Eventually, I went over to the Hershey Company. I always tell people that my kid's favorite title that I've ever had is when I was the director of Twizzlers and Jolly Rancher. And then
you can't get better than that, though.
That was literally. I wish I still had. I must have had business cards, but I don't have that business card anymore. But like that feels like it should have been framed on the wall. and then I ended up. I worked for Offhold, which is the parent of Stop and Shop, for a number of years, and then I worked as the head of marketing at Cracker Barrel, the restaurant company, for many years down in Tennessee. So I was gone from the Boston area for, I don't know, I guess almost 25 to plus years. I guess I was gone, and then we came back in 2021, and then since then have sort of started doing I've got a couple of different irons in the fire. I'm sure you all will ask me about, but left the food corporate world about a year ago, and have been doing lots of different things since. So lots of fun stuff. But that's kind of my story. I'm kind of a science guy turned marketing guy, whatever. So
I think there's overlap there. I mean,
sure.
Well, I was gonna say, like, what made you say, I want to go back to school for marketing? Like, why marketing, and like, why not just, maybe try to find a career? It was like, nope, I want to go back to school and deep dive into this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of things. One was, I remember in college, I was like, terrible in the chemistry lab. So I don't think anything that I always joke about myself, like I'm not good at any sport that involves coordination or a ball. And so that's pretty much the way I am in the lab as well. Like anything that involves like tools, implementing anything like in the real world or whatever, I just don't have that capability. And so I was interested in teaching. I like teaching, but it just wasn't sort of a passion of mine. And so my wife and I got married in the late 90s, and I went down to Washington, D.C., where she was living at the time, and I was looking for a job through the newspaper because I'm old, right? And there was internet. I mean, I'm not that old, but I actually got the job. I ended up getting there was a guy named Milton Kotler, whose brother, Philip Kotler, wrote the marketing textbook that everybody in the world basically used at the time. And for years and years, he's still sort of well known. I think he's still alive. But his brother had essentially created a consulting company, sort of around kind of leveraging, Milton, the brother that I worked for, leveraging Philip's name to kind of get consulting gigs and so forth. And he was looking for somebody because they were trying to get a client in Mexico to sign on. And so he was looking for somebody who spoke Spanish, and I had studied Spanish. And so he hired me on, and I will admit that I think I lasted about 6 weeks before I quit, but that was where I learned about marketing. I remember him walking me down, like we were walking down K Street in Washington, D.C., and he's like literally pointing at like buildings and going, you see those bricks? Somebody had to market those. And you see that flag? Somebody had to market that. And I'm like, my mind blown, because I'm like, I guess I thought about marketing as sort of, advertising, and I didn't really know anything about it because I was a math and physics teacher. And so I thought this was really cool. And so that's why I ended up going off to business school, studying marketing, and then got a internship at Nabisco, and that's how I ended up in the food world. So it was a little bit of like a, it's just, I always think about my career as it's always just been like, whatever the opportunity was at the moment, take the right opportunities and keep moving forward. And I think that's how I ended up not being a scientist. And here I am. So
I mean, I think it's such a fascinating, thing to delve into, though, because so many people that I know, they go to school for one thing and then they find out, I want to do X, or, so I think that can be really scary sometimes, especially after like studying and wanting to stay the path that you decided from a young age. But I'm always so interested to hear what made kind of that page flip, and then taking those next steps. And I think taking that job, sometimes it's more important to take a job out of, just to test it out. Otherwise you'll never know. And sometimes learning what you don't like is more impactful than what you do like. And obviously you took a lot out of that. So very fascinating. Okay.
Totally agree. And I will say, I think that sort of career path, that sort of meandering career path, is going to become more and more common, right? Because jobs are getting disrupted at a pace that like I don't think we even have ever imagined before. And so if you have to be able to go, okay, I used to do this, now I do this other thing, and just being open-minded and seeing, understanding where else you can take your skill. I think it's becoming more important.
And we all evolve. So, like look at a startup. I love thinking about careers as startups. You start in one spot, and like that's why I personally really love startups and working with them, because I think it gives so many opportunities for people to kind of figure out what they want to do and then kind of experience different parts of the business. So I love that you were able to kind of do a career shift, I guess a couple times, because you have so many different ventures now that I wouldn't consider you your standard, marketing person. One question that came. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. Did you have a question?
Oh, I was going to say, going back to our dinner there the other night, one of the things that was really interesting to me was the adventure with your brother, and just kind of thinking about like all the intersection of the networking type stuff that we do, and kind of how that can, I would say, come full circle. Like I'm curious about learning more.
Yeah, so I have a twin brother. His name is Eric, and we are identical twins. But he's the one with the beard. So if you see me around and I don't respond, that's why. It's probably him.
Is that an agreement from you both? Yeah. Like one has to have a beard, one has to have a shaven face.
I don't know. It just sort of happened that way. But I'm sure I get in trouble if I tried to grow the beard. But so he actually is a coder. Has been in the biotech world, has been part of biotech startups and so forth. But in the spring, I wrote a book and I published a book in the spring, and he was sort of interested in like, we're trying to do like marketing of my book, and marketing a book might be the hardest thing I've ever had to market in my life. Because it's like you're literally selling like a copy at a time. It's not like, it's not like Oreos. We're just like, hey, Oreos. And people are like, yeah, I gotta get some. And so one of the things that we were sort of getting interested in was this idea of, we can take video of Jeff talking, right? So video of me talking, and then break it up into clips. And my brother was like getting really annoyed because you had to do the little thing with the slider where you had to find it. And he was like, I'm not doing that. And so he created a tool where it essentially like it uses a ChatGPT large language model kind of thing to essentially read the transcript, figure out where to clip, and then clip. Right. And then so that was the first thing he did, was it just creates clips of video. And then the next thing he did was, I was like, well, I also want to post like quotes from my book. And so I just gave him a list of quotes, and he basically automated like this tool that essentially generates clips or quotes from the basic based on what I put in there. And so then we were asked, we ended up having all these conversations with people. We were talking to this person that's a book marketer, and we're like, oh, can we create an automation tool that actually extracts quotes from the book without a human being involved? And so he did that, and then
so cool.
Yeah. And so then the next thing we sort of thought about was, well, what if could we take this information, all this stuff that I've written, and create essentially a virtual Jeff that you could ask questions? And so he did that. So there's a virtual Jeff. You can ask it questions about middle management. You can even ask it questions that aren't in the book. If you ask it, like, what's Jeff's favorite movie, it will give you an answer. It says, Jeff doesn't talk about that in the book, but I think his favorite movie would be, it'll say, but I think his favorite movie might be something like Dead Poets Society. And then it'll give you a very, very rational reason why it thinks that, that would be my favorent movie. And it explains, like, Jeff really cares about leadership and developing people or whatever. And so
it's a great movie.
It is a great movie. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it was a good answer. And so we were looking at all these sort of automation tools. And then so what we started to do is we started to have product market fit conversations, is what I'll call them. So we would hop on the phone. We're still doing them now. Like, we hop on the phone with people and we essentially ask them questions about how do you do your business development. And what we've come to sort of discover, and Amelia, like the small business world, I'm sure you are very familiar with this, is there's a point that happens in the sort of maturation of a small business where they kind of hit the wall where the friends and family BD runs out.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out, how do I go beyond this?
Totally.
And what some of them do, maybe a lot of them do, is they go, oh, we need a marketer. And so they go out and they hire somebody who basically, because they can only pay like, whatever, $50,000, $60,000 a year, they hire some very junior person who knows a little bit about SEO and knows how to post on TikTok and whatever, like this. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but doesn't have like sort of the strategic thinking and whatever. And essentially they hire that person, and then everybody gets frustrated because the senior leaders are like, well, this person isn't really, this marketing stuff isn't really working. It's not really driving business, because they don't understand, by the way, that the purpose of the marketing is to create the connections that the BD folks can really, drive, right? Yeah. And then the marketer's getting annoyed because they're like, well, you want me to drive SEO? I need you to write articles, right? Like, that's how you drive SEO, right?
Yeah.
Actually give me content to send people to. And so we sort of looked at that and said, hey, there's this huge opportunity with companies to sort of say, hey, don't hire that marketer. Come work with us. We don't do marketing. We do business development enablement, is what we talk about. And our whole thing is, how do we basically create an ecosystem around what your BD folks are trying to do, and basically give them the tools that they need to do the selling that they need to do. And we solve the problem of that marketer you're going to get by automating a lot of the content production. And so that's kind of what we're working on. So for example, like, how do I take, for example, that capability I was talking about, where I can interview you, for example, Amelia, I could interview you for an hour, take that interview, use the interview as source material, and basically create essentially a virtual Amelia that I can now ask questions, or ask it to develop a post that sounds like you and all that kind of stuff, and then give you that content that you can then go and post. Yeah. And so again, what we've sort of figured out is, don't focus on the tools. The tools are important, but they're important because they take all of that Canva time, out of but the idea is, I really want to figure out, how do I help support your business development efforts and give you the things that you need? Because so many people, founders in particular, but I'm sure this is true, but like, they're like, you should really be posting about your business probably 4 times a week at least. Yep. That's a lot of work in terms of getting that content out there. And so forth. So how do we create the strategy? This is, here's where we're going to post. Here's how we're going to create an ecosystem. Here's how we're going to make actually, one of my favorite ones is like the website. You often run into new companies where their website's like a couple of years old. It hasn't been kept up to date. You've been changing what your product is like 15 times. And so now your website is not aligned. And so what I've run into before is, you'll find BD people who go, I never send anybody to the website because it's confusing. And I'm like, that's a problem. Yeah. Because if the website is confused. Yeah, right. So I never send anybody there, but guess what? They go there anyway. I always here, Stephen, you'll like this analogy. I always like it. The analogy I like to use is it's a little bit like having a fine French restaurant, but the windows are broken and the door is falling off its hinges, right? It's not that's not how you're bringing people into the restaurant. It's all word of mouth, warm connections, referrals, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But and once they get in the restaurant, it's great, right? The company does everything it says in it, but you drive by and you're like, the windows are broken. I'm not going in there. Like, what does the kitchen look like? You know, my food. So anyway, that's what we've been working on. So that's the BD enablement stuff that we're doing. And the company's called Twinning Edge. Lots of puns in there, but that's what we're working on.
I like how we've named this episode "Living on the Twinning Edge."
Yes, exactly.
Just to highlight you as well. One question I've been thinking of this whole time, just because you were a teacher, then you found your job, you kind of got into the food service space, and now you're out doing your own thing. And just because this is a networking podcast too, how has networking progressed your career at each stage?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, for me, I don't know. I just really didn't do much networking for a really long time. I mean, when you're in a, sort of corporate marketing role, not a sales role, you really don't have to network. I mean, you network a little bit like sort of internally, like having with somebody or whatever, but I just never really did it. And so really, I feel like even with people that I knew that I worked with, I just never reached out that much. And so it's really only been probably the last, 18 months to 2 years that I've really been networking. And it really actually started out with something that my twin brother, Eric, told me, which was, I think I might've said this on one of the other episodes he said, all those people that you're worried about ignoring you on LinkedIn, he said, they're ignoring you right now. And I'm like, oh, right. So it doesn't matter, right? If I shoot them a note, whatever. And I think, for me, it's been this process of learning this point, which is who cares if somebody, if you send somebody a note and they don't respond to you, or they think you're being too salesy or whatever it is, move on, because there are like 8 billion people in the world that you could talk to. So this person doesn't want to talk to you, whatever, and I think the other thing is just, not getting discouraged. I mean, sometimes you send somebody a note and they don't respond to you, and then they'll send you a note,
years later.
years later. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that, whatever it was. But yeah, I mean, for me right now, obviously networking has become huge. Right now, I've been talking to a lot of people. I mentioned I published a book in the spring. And so I've been talking to a lot of people about the book, and trying to, sort of get connections. I have later this month, I'm doing I'm the book for the book club of Predictive Index. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Predictive Index, but I mentioned earlier that I gave a presentation to a pretty big HR services company last week. So just awesome stuff, but it's all through networking and talking to people and connecting with them and many times just sending them my book, and then they read the book and they're like, oh, this is really good. And then I say, hey, would you write me a review, which is like the hardest thing in the world for an author is to get reviews of your book. And so then I'm like, oh, do you have any opportunities for me to present or whatever it is? So that's been huge. And then of course, with the Twinning Edge stuff right now, what we've really been doing is just going out and asking people, can we talk to you about your business development? We want to understand how you're doing it today, because we're trying to find what's that gap in the market. Where is there an opportunity? And we're iterating. Actually, there's an amazing book. Have any of you ever read the book called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution? It's all about startups and how you basically have to start with what's the problem you're solving, and stop getting married to here's how I solve that problem, and change the product to match what people are looking for, as opposed to changing the problem that you're trying to solve to match the product that you came up with. And so that's what we've been doing, sort of product market fit interviews. And people seem pretty open to hopping on a call and just telling us what they're doing. And then we talk about what we're doing. And sometimes they're interested and sometimes they're not. And that's okay. But yeah, absolutely. Networking has been huge. So.
I was gonna say I really like how you are going after it in that sense of more research and discovery, because people of course, or I would hope to think anyways, and I used to when I used to work with startups, do the same exact thing. Is it is a way to get in front of certain companies, but the
Yeah.
purpose of it being, I want to, thought leadership, give me what you're embracing so that we can actually continue on our road length, and again promise the results or the findings back to them. That right there is the collaboration is incredible. And to your point, sometimes they're going to be interested, sometimes not, but those people will always remember you, and you have no idea where, that could lead. Maybe they'll refer their network over to you. So it really becomes full circle. And my question to you, and I know we're coming up on time here, but I had two big ones that I want to touch base on. One, I want to hear a little bit more about your book, to keep referencing it, and what got you to write it. But I wanted to, and you talked a little bit, but the strategy, I think you mentioned, throughout your career has changed and different ventures. There's always a strategy to networking. Sometimes it's just to meet people, but you have to also, you only have so much time in a week, in a month. You have your personal side too. So it's, how am I going to, reap the benefits? Who am I going to reach out to? What events? How do I get to those events?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so about the book, so I, basically my whole career was in middle management roles. I had people reporting to me, I was reporting to people. And, one of the things that I sort of realized actually in the last couple of years is there's so many people who end up in those middle management roles because they are good at doing something. They might be good at sales, they might be good at finance, they might be good at engineering, and they're suddenly promoted and they're supposed to lead people, but they're given no guidance on how to do that. And so it's very frustrating, I think, for a lot of people. I think it actually might be one of the causes of what we call imposter syndrome, where you're like, this must be easy because nobody's ever taught me how to do it, and yet I don't know how to do it. But I was really good at my job before, so this is very frustrating, whatever. And so I was thinking, wow, wouldn't it be helpful if people just knew some of the things that I had learned along the way? I wish I had known them. And actually, it's been funny because one of the most common pieces of feedback I get from people who've read my book is they say, this is a book I wish I had 20 years ago.
That's awesome. I think that's the best compliment someone could give you, to be honest.
It is. And I'm not sure that I could have, I certainly couldn't have written the book 20 years ago because I didn't know all this stuff.
It's experience. That's what you're giving people, is your experience. That's incredible.
Well, and the other thing is I very much wanted to write a book that was not about like Jeff the guru and all his successes, whatever, which is a lot of the business books that out there. People like, yeah, if you just knew what came down to me from on high, you would also be successful. I did not want to do that, and so that's
those books are. Sorry to anyone. I don't want to offend anyone.
Whatever. But a lot of the book is all, and I think I mentioned, or I might have mentioned in the past, like I started writing during the pandemic. I actually started writing fiction. And so when I started writing this book, I actually wrote it all in the form of stories. So it's like mostly stories from my career. And a lot of them are stories where I screwed up.
Yep.
Here's what I learned, and here's how I would have done it differently, and whatever. And people, that was the other piece of feedback that I keep getting that I find really, heartening, is people say, it's so nice to read this book and feel like I'm not alone. I think so many people feel sort of lost in that middle management role. And so, so anyway, I think I wrote it in part because I just wanted to impart my wisdom, from my school of hard knocks. But I also think, in part, maybe I was sort of working through some corporate PTSD or something.
This was your therapy.
This is my therapy. I had to write this book, but it's been super fun writing about this. And of course, I write about middle management topics every week. I post articles, and I think this week I posted an article about how you should start off with a new direct report, and what's the best way to do that, kinds of things, whatever. I've also posted things about so your boss is a micromanager, and do you know what, people don't click like on those. I don't know why.
We all know them.
That they don't want to expose their manager.
Expose their manager, right? So anyway, so that's the book. And then as far as your other question, which was about networking strategy, I don't know. I mean, I think, we could talk about that for another half an hour or maybe much longer. But I think the most interesting thing that I've learned in the last year is this point that the point of networking even when you have a sales goal, the point of networking is all about creating trust. I'm trying to make a human connection with somebody so that they trust me. When you are selling Coca-Cola, like part of the reason Coca-Cola does so well is because we trust it, right? Every time you get a can of Coca-Cola, it's basically the same. You know what it is, whatever.
Well,
and so all they have to do is say Coca-Cola, and people are like, all right, I'll go buy that. You have to give them more reasons to buy it or whatever to get them to buy more, but they will buy it and they trust it. When you are a small business or a business that nobody has ever heard of, they don't trust you. And so the first thing you have to do is build trust. And so, actually we have a friend who calls it pitch slapping. I don't know if you've ever heard this term before, but
No.
when somebody reaches out to you on LinkedIn and they're like, hey, would love to connect, and you're like, sure, and then they go, can I sell you something? And you're like, whoa, that was
Never mind.
anymore. Why? Because you basically burned trust, right? Like we were about to build a connection, and you could have capitalized on maybe later. Oh, we got a visitor.
Yes.
Capitalized on later, but instead, what you did was you pitch slapped me, and now I'm not interested in talking to you anymore. So that, I think, is to me, the strategy is all about sort of taking that big step back and being like, if you come across, even if you are desperate for that sale, you can't come across as desperate for the sale, because nobody trusts somebody who's just in it for themselves. You have to bring people value. You have to create connections that people care about. So that's how I think about the strategy. So I realize I've probably taken us over time, but this is always fun to talk about myself. So
yeah, and hearing about it, you have such a great background. So being and I'm sure we're gonna probably have to have another episode to again ask very pointed questions, and because it takes a lot, not where you are today, and you've been so successful with your brother and your book and everything else you got going on, and everything and that's why you wrote a book, is all the experiences. So that was really great though. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you should market those Jeff as a service.
Jeff as a service, yes.
Jazz.
Well, shall we do a quick round to finish up the episode and say what very lightning round, what cool thing are you going to do this week from a networking perspective?
Yeah.
I can if you want. I have been talking with the University of Rochester, which is where I did my MBA, for like a year now, because I'm trying to figure out like if there's something I can do some work with respect to my book. And so I happen to be going up to Rochester for a wedding on Friday, and I am meeting with bunch of people that I know from, for other reasons, but also from a bunch of folks at the university. I'm super excited to see if we can figure out if some way to get my book out in front of either the alums or the students or whatever. So that's my cool networking thing that I'm doing.
That's cool.
That's very cool.
That's nice. Full circle.
I will pass it over to Amelia.
All right. So I'm going to, it's called The Foundry. It's a new networking group that I'm trying, and it's supposed to be of all founders. I saw it online, and I'm trying to, I feel like I knew what kind of networking events worked in my previous role. And I'm really excited. I think I talked about this on the first podcast of getting to kind of go out, and now I know how to network. So now I'm excited to try new groups and start talking about my new role and talking about the new company. So I'll be doing that one. I have a reconnect with an old partner of mine where, she's once every 6 months, she hosts a networking group up in New Hampshire. So I'm going to go there, get to chat with her. And then I know we talked about it last time on the podcast, Venture Cafe on Thursday. I'll be there as well. So it's an action-packed week, but I'm really excited to actually get out and start doing things this week and practicing my talk tracks and hopefully getting some traction here. Awesome. I'm going to skip Stephen and go to Taylor because I feel like we already did the circle. So we're going to mix it up a little bit.
Perfect. And you know what? I'm going to put the bug in now. I think next week, Amelia, I would love to hear if it is you, but in general, would love to hear how you're navigating the new role with these, again, practicing your pitch. I think that's a great thing you brought up. That is something that people don't always talk about. And navigating those areas. So definitely interested in hearing that. And the Foundry, I haven't heard of that, and I'm going to look into it. Networking, you learn about new organizations. So.
Exactly.
I like the role reversal where Taylor just volunteered you, Amelia.
I like it. I know she's taking over today.
Oh, it was Amelia. But I actually might also go to Venture Cafe on Thursday, so I might choose you there. I know. Stephen brought it up to me, so I haven't been yet, but I've been wanting to. So might try out the Venture Cafe, and then Wednesday I have Cocktails and Conversations. It's put on by Crew, but a few other organizations, and it's women leading the way in commercial real estate. So there's a lot of different groups there that I haven't met and been a part of. So it's more educational, but then also there's a great networking aspect to it. So this week's pretty light. I'm looking forward to it, but every time there is a light week, I feel like I'm missing something and there's too much energy. So I might have to look into a few others.
Awesome.
All about the FOMO.
Yeah. Stephen, what about you?
Stephen.
Yeah, good question. So I think ultimately, I was initially planning on going to the Venture Cafe until a short while ago, as something else just came up via a networking event. And basically what he's doing is it's a financial planner, and he's doing something that is really focused at, and it sounds like we had a very, very, very brief conversation. It was right before this, but really heavily focused on a lot of business owners. And what they're doing is they're setting up a booth, and obviously with the goal of pulling in clients, but really meeting those sort of business owners, that sort of thing. And so he's asked that I also join, where I'll be speaking to the wine side of the house and also offering up a blending package. So for those of you who have enjoyed that experience, basically doing a blending package for 12 people. So, give us your information, let's make a connection, that sort of thing. And then you can win, a blending package, which is very cool. So that'll be a lot of fun, interesting. So like I said, up until 2 hours ago, Venture Cafe, now it's something different. But then there's a few other
dynamic.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, at some point we're gonna have to coordinate and actually all end up live in the same place. I think that would be really good.
I agree.
I would agree. And there's a couple of other ones. I have a virtual one tonight. I think, Jeff, you should definitely pitch doing some sort of wine tasting for a book lunch at some point in the future, of course, with your Rochester folks. I know a guy. And then definitely looking forward to hearing about Foundry as well. I think that sounds like a really interesting one.
I'll forward you guys the information. I think you can still sign up and it was free. So
cool. Actually, one last thing, and this was by virtue of a networking event. There's a company called NewView, and they put on different seminars, that sort of thing. So I will be doing a 3-day seminar for the next 3 days, which came about by a different networking event as well. So we're looking forward to that. It's called the Counselor Sales, and it's really heavy focus on a lot of the things we've talked about as far as building trust and all those sort of other sales tactics and approaches. So
very good. Well,
interesting.
Another great episode. Episode 3 is in the books, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week. Amelia, you're going to have to give me a title. So.
Oh, geez. Okay. Yeah. Eventually, we promise you guys we'll get this down in 20 minutes. One day we'll succeed at that.
It's okay. It's okay. Anyway, awesome. Always great chatting with you all, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.